Hello and welcome to 14-2 or Module 14, Lesson 2 of Scatterplots. We're going to go into trend lines and making predictions for today. All right, so drawing a trend line. So the first thing is we're going to review from yesterday, just making a scatter plot. So it's taking all of these ordered pairs, which are called bivariate data, and this is the X value, and this is the Y value, and we're just going to graph these. So 4, 38, 225, 1, 7, 2, 16, 3, 26, 555, 220, 445, and 331. All right, so we have all these data. This is scattered about, but it seems to be making a pattern, and it looks like as we go further in distance, it seems to take us longer. So we would say that this has a positive correlation. And in this positive correlation, we can make something, and you saw us yesterday draw some lines through some data. So this is called a trend line. It is a straight line that comes closest to the point, so that when we make this trend line, we want this trend line or the line to go through the data so that you have some points above it, some points below it, and it may go through 1 or 2 points actually themselves. So this is what is considered the trend line. It is the straight line through the data. Okay, some points above it, some points below it. All right, so now they want us, one of the questions down here at the bottom that you can't see, I don't think, says use your trend line to predict how long it would take to run 4.5 miles. So I'm just going to change colors here and go over to 4.5. And what I like to do is go up to my trend line. So I draw a line straight up to my trend line, and then I draw it over, and this point right here where this is crossing my y-axis. So they're saying at 4.5 miles, it should take approximately 45 minutes to do this. So you're going to have 3 questions like this on your homework today. So you take your scatter plot, you draw the best trend line you can, and sometimes they might actually have that trend line in there. And you go from the point they give you up to your trend line and over, and this is where your answer would be. Okay, so how do you know if a trend line is bad or not? So this example's done, we're good. I'm just going to show you a couple bad trend lines. So this trend line right here, it might go through some of the points, but you see how we only have 1, 2 points below it, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points above it. That is a bad trend line. Okay, it is bad because we have more points on top than we do on the bottom. So you want to put your line fairly evenly through your points to the best of your ability. All right, another question here. We already have the scatter plot, and you can see that they already have a trend line. So they might very well just ask you to make a prediction and say, okay, if it's 18 chapters, how many pages would it be? So if we went over to 18 chapters, and they want to know how many pages it is, then we go over to 18, up to your trend line and over it, and it looks like it would be 180 pages. So there's going to be 3 of those on your homework. That's not what they're asking this time around. These are going to be questions that are on number 6 and number 7 on your homework. So they want us to actually write an equation of this line. So we have practiced writing equations before, and we have a tendency to write them in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form. So in your homework, the first thing, this would be y equals blank, x plus blank. And what goes in this first one is your slope, and then your y-intercept. So I think number 6 on your homework is asking you to just find the slope. And just because there's lots of different ordered pairs here, and to make this a little bit easier, we decided to give you the 2 ordered pairs we wanted you to use. So the 2 ordered pairs that we're going to have you use in this particular instance is going to be 550 and 17 comma 170. Now, if you remember, we have slope is change in y over change in x, which means we're going to take our y values and subtract them, and you're going to take your x values and subtract them. And remember, y goes on top. Some of you were keeping track of how many times I said that. What letter goes on top? Y goes on top. So a lot of times what I had you guys do was circle the two y values so that you would concentrate on those. Remember, in an ordered pair, we always write it x comma y, and y is always the second value. So that's your 50 and your 170. So that's what I'm going to put on top is 50 minus 170, just like the formula says. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to find my x values, which are the first numbers. So I have 5 minus 17. So 50 minus 170 is going to give us a negative 120. And on the bottom, when we do 5 minus 17, we're going to get a negative 12. Now take negative 120 and divide by negative 12, and your answer should come out to be 10. So in number 6, this is all you're going to have to do is find that slope. So they give you the two ordered pairs, and you find the slope, and that's what your answer is 10. Now, if they're asking you in number 7, they're going to say, hey, the slope is 10. Now, let's find the y-intercept. So if we know that this slope is 10, this is already going to be filled in. We can fill that in. And what we need to find now is the y-intercept. And they're going to give us a point like they just did here, 5, 50. And I always like to write my letters by it, x and y. So I know that my y value is 50. And I'm going to substitute that number 50 in for y. Then we have a 10, and in place of my x, that x value over here is a 5, and I'm solving for b, or my y-intercept. So now I'm going to do 50, and I have 10 times 5 is 50, and solve for b. So now I'm going to subtract 50 from both sides, and it looks like I have 0 equals b. Well, if we would have just looked up here, we could have seen that this thing is going through that ordered pair 0, 0. That's where it's crossing my y-axis. So I know that this y-intercept is 0. So here's your equation. Y equals 10x plus 0. Okay, we're going to use this equation a little bit later in a couple questions. So they're going to have us refer back to this, and they're just going to use this part of it, y equals 10x. But these are two big questions on your homework. Finding slope, remember y goes on top, and then plugging in that ordered pair x and y. Make sure you get the y value in for y and the x value in for x, and then you will solve for your b, or your y-intercept. All right, here we have another scatter plot, and it has the trend line. Looks like this is a positive correlation, and they want us to write an equation. Now, if you look here, none of these dots go exactly through this. So I'm just going to quickly go through how to do this again. Y equals blank, x plus blank. So we need to find the slope. So I'm going to pick this point right here because it is 1, 1. That trend line is going through that point. Then I'm going to find another point far away from it, and it looks like it's going through that point right there, which is 9, 8. Now, those are my 2 points. And remember, we're going to do y on top, x on the bottom. So I'm going to circle my y values. So these go on top. So I'm going to do 8 minus 1. And x's go on the bottom, 9 minus 1. So 8 minus 1 is 7, and 9 minus 1 is 8. So we get the slope of 7/8. Okay, now we're going to have to plug in an ordered pair, and I'm just going to use this first one because it's easier, 1, 1. And then, to be honest, because they're both 1s, it doesn't matter which one I get in for x and y. So 1 equals 7/8 times 1 plus b. So I'm going to do 7/8 times 1 is 7/8, and I'm going to subtract 7/8 from both sides. And you guys will be able to use your calculator, but 1 minus 7/8 is actually 1/8. So we're saying that this y-intercept is going to be over here at 1/8. All right, so hopefully that's a review for finding your slope and your y-intercept. All right, here's this one I was talking about, that they're going to use this equation y equals 10x, and they want you to predict what 26 chapter books will be. So we're going to just plug 26 in for x and do the math. So y equals 10 times 26. So y equals 260 pages. So once we have an equation, we can just plug that number in and solve. Here, they're asking us to make a prediction of 14 chapters. So this time, they want us to put a 14 in for x and do the math. So this is saying 140 pages. So if something is a 14 chapter book, you'd be looking at it maybe having 140 pages. All right, here we have a scatter plot. They want us to draw a trend line. So let me just see if I can make a trend line through that. Some points above, some points below. So use the equation to find the price of 7 ounces. 7 ounces, okay? So I'm going to do my 7 ounces in blue. So I'm going to go over here, 5, right in the middle would be 8. So 7's going to be here. So I'm going to go up to my trend line, and then I'm going to go over, and it looks like it is going to be 60 cents. Okay, now if they ask me to go over and now they want to do 50 ounces, 50 ounces isn't on here. So this is where we would want to have an equation to be able to plug it in, because our graph doesn't go that big. So any homework we give you, if they want to do something big like 50 ounces, they're going to give you the equation. So whatever that equation is, this is certainly not the right equation for this, but they would want you to then take that 50 and plug that number here in for x and solve. Or if you can use your graph, then you can go right to your graph and go up and over. Okay, I think the last problem that I want to do here is going to be, so here's one with making a prediction at 70. So we'll do this one and one more. So 70% humidity. So if you look at 70, do you see how it's right here dead smack between 60 and 70? 60 and 80, 70 would be dead in the middle. So we would just pick the middle between 72 and 74. And so we would say that that's at 73 degrees. Okay, so sometimes you have to graph things, sometimes you can use the chart and interpret and make it be the best. Okay, so the last thing that I want to go through is you're going to have a couple of these. Pick the equation from your graph. So we have quickly talked about the y-intercept, and remember the y-intercept is where your trend line, so if you look at your trend line here, where it would be crossing the y-axis. So that's what I like to do, is focus on is my y-intercept, and then the fact that this is a negative slope. So if we're looking for a negative slope, I look at number 1 and see the slope here in front of x, that's a positive number. So that cannot be my answer. Number 2, here we have a negative, so that is good. We want a negative slope. Number 3 is a positive slope. We do not want that. 4 is a negative slope, so those are both good. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to focus on this y-intercept. If you look at this blue line, where is this roughly touching that y-axis at? Well, if you look over here, this number right here is a 5. This is your y-intercept. And that's at a 5, which would be down here. That green line comes nowhere near that. But if you look at this, whoops, I have a typo in here. This should have been a plus 35. So if we look at that, we're up here at a plus 35. So this one right here is going to be your answer. It has the negative slope that we were looking for and the correct y-intercept at plus 35. All right, so those are the things to be looking at. Good luck on this. If you need to, stop and review as you're going through your homework. Good luck.